By the rude bridge that arched the flood, their flag to April's breeze unfurled. Here once the embattled farmer stood, and fired the shot heard round the world. These famous words by Ralph Waldo Emerson embody the spirit of the American Revolution. Farmers, blacksmiths, tanners, shoemakers, ordinary citizens stood face to face with the highly trained British Army on the fields of Lexington and Concord. On April 19, 1775, these men fired the shot that would begin the American Revolution. After hearing the news of revolution, a musician named John Greenwood set off on foot from Falmouth, Maine, and walked the 150 miles to Boston, fife in hand. Along his route, he would stop at taverns where troops were gathered and would play a tune or two on his fife. From the first days of the United States, there have been musicians serving the country. These musicians served various functions and played an important role in the Revolution. John Diamond, a drummer in Captain John Parker's Lexington militia, beat to arms at the Battle of Lexington. A fife and drum corps was on hand to perform at the celebration after Ethan Allen and his Green Mountain Boys captured Fort Ticonderoga in May of 1775. At the 1777 Battle of Bennington, Colonel John Stark ordered his fife and drum corps to play right into the teeth of the enemy, helping to inspire his troops to victory. Shortly after the war began, the Continental Congress moved quickly to formally organize the new American Continental Army. The resolution, passed on June 14, 1775, states that each company consists of a captain, 3 lieutenants, 4 sergeants, 4 corporals, a drummer or a trumpeter, and 68 privates. Soon afterwards, George Washington was commissioned as our first commander-in-chief. In assuming these duties, Washington was tasked with creating a professional military force from the ground up. Being an accomplished flutist himself, one of his concerns was the quality of music in the Army. Military drills relied heavily on music, and the low quality of musicians in the Army made drilling nearly impossible. Washington ordered his musicians to train with regimental drum and fife majors, and only after receiving their approval could musicians perform with the regiment. Despite these efforts, the overall quality of music and organization in the new Army remained low. Seeking to address Washington's concerns, Congress voted to reorganize the Army in 1778. Included in the act was establishing pay scales for infantrymen, artillerymen, and musicians, as well as authorizing staff positions for drum and fife majors throughout the Army. Washington took his own actions to better regulate his army. One of the most influential decisions was advocating for Prussian-born Baron Frederick Wilhelm von Steuben to be the first Inspector General for the Continental Army. In March of 1779, von Steuben's Regulations for the Order and Discipline of the Troops of the United States was approved by Congress for use as the manual for the entire Army. This manual would remain in use until 1824. Chapter 21, entitled Of the Different Beats of the Drum, standardized drum beats and signals for the Army. His regulations did not allow for verbal commands, and each man would have to learn to respond instantly to the sound of the drum. Even with standardized practices, too few of the drum and fife majors in the Army were familiar enough with the practices to teach these calls to their musicians. Washington appointed Lieutenant John Huell as Inspector and Superintendent of Music in the Army. Today's band officers' duties of organizing rehearsals and setting performance standards can be traced back to Lieutenant Huell. While musicians in the Army performed important functional duties, music's true power lies in its ability to inspire. Born in Boston in 1746, William Billings holds the distinction of being America's first professional composer. Originally a tanner, Billings abandoned the trade for music. In 1770, he published his first collection of hymns titled The New England Psalm Singer. His friend and fellow Bostonian, Paul Revere, would engrave the title page for this first ever collection of hymns written exclusively by un-American. It is in this collection that Chester, a hymn that has been called America's first national anthem, the Anthem of New England, and America's Marseillaise, appeared. Shortly after the news of Lexington and Concord, Billings began to turn his hymns into war songs by adding patriotic lyrics. In 1778, his second collection of songs was published, this time with lyrics included alongside the music of Chester. The text calls out British generals by name, proclaims that New England's God is on the side of the patriots, and mocks the British regulars who yield to the beardless boys of the Continental Army. Chester would be sung in army camps, while marching, and at patriotic rallies throughout the colonies.
For the last 3 years, I've had the great fortune of living in this neighborhood of Groton Heights. And on many early evenings, such as this one, I find myself wandering through this neighborhood and exploring this great fort. As I started to study the history of musicians serving in the military and discovered the importance of early patriotic songs, I couldn't help but think of the soldiers who would use these songs as a source of inspiration. What was going on in their hearts and minds as they saw this British force amassing before them? This performance of Chester is in honor of those men and countless others who gave their lives to fight for our independence as a nation.